Welcome, everyone. I'm Kate Johansson with Fast Pup Dog Training here in Washington. I'm just near Tacoma, Washington, south of Seattle. And I've just changed the name of the show because at the last minute, there was an emergency that came up. Bill Church was supposed to be my co-host today, one of my co-hosts, along with JT Clough. Hi, JT. Thank you. And just if you're listening to this later or you're joining just now, yours truly, Kate Johansson, just instead of adding JT Clough as my host, I accidentally banned her from my broadcast. So I've started a new broadcast, and it's called the brand new Faith Training for Dogs. And I'm going to hit the show callers button, and I'm going to accept. And that was so much easier this time because I didn't have a choice to hit the exclamation point or add as a host. So that was great.
So did you add it as a host then? Me as a host?
I just accepted you. So let me go back. Oh, okay. That's why it didn't come up. So I will not hit the exclamation point. I will hit the host.
There you go.
I'll get better at this.
Yeah, no, it's you know. There's all kinds of little, and the other thing is that Blab keeps changing all these little things. So you go in there, and once you do something, it changes. But anyway, so we're recording, so we'll go ahead and deal with the Blab thing later.
So if anybody's coming into Blab or listening afterwards, and you're not familiar with Blab, so if you're listening to this on YouTube, Blab is this really cool new program that hasn't even been available for even a year yet, and it's still in beta. And so those of us who are using it, we're all still learning, and things are changing, but they can keep changing and fine-tuning as much as they want because I just love using Blabs. That's a shout out to all the developers over there. They're working like 24/7. All those folks, they don't get a lot of sleep. And so my hat's off to them. And so I was just explaining that the broadcast today was supposed to be about holistic healing for dogs and their people. But at the last minute, I got a message from Bill Church, who is another dog trainer, dog professional, who is about 45 miles north of Seattle. He had to run into Seattle to pick up a couple dogs, and it sounded like an emergency. So he asked to reschedule. And so I'm really looking forward to having him on again. What I was telling everybody is that he has in the trenches experience with alternative methods and alternative treatments for really severe issues. His wife has an autoimmune issue that was very severe, and they have been able to reverse it, and her quality of life has gone up. And then he's also had a couple of dogs that have been brought to him by the owners who couldn't handle, having to put them down. And Bill has been witness to some of the treatments actually reversing the cancer, not getting rid of it, but shrinking tumors, and to the point where the dogs have a really great quality of and stuff like that. So JT's dog just barked, and so mine barked. So anytime you get a couple of dog trainers together, just expect to hear some barking. Welcome, everyone. Is that David? Hi, David. So what I decided to do for Plan B is talk about faith training, or having faith when we're training dogs. And I wanted to put up a picture of a German Shepherd that I've been working with for the last 2 months. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that because my technical skill isn't probably as good as it should be to be able to just whip off and do that. But he's this gorgeous black and tan German Shepherd that I was called in. It was actually a referral. The people who own this dog are police officers. They work for a couple of local police departments. And this particular dog, they have two. They have a beautiful black German Shepherd that they had already. And then this particular German Shepherd was brought into the local police department when he was about 2, not quite 2, and he was offered to them as a police dog. And basically the guy said he couldn't keep him because he lived in a tiny apartment and it just wasn't a good situation for the dog. But the dog had obviously been trained somewhat for some protection work. And the reason I say that is I'd never seen behavior like this in a dog. So my suspicion is that they spent a lot of time doing agitation work with the dog, and they never got around to doing any obedience. So, and the dog is, once he gets loose, once he's no longer on a leash, he's fine. He doesn't bite. He doesn't attack other dogs. He doesn't attack people. But while you're holding onto his leash, he is agitating, frantically, doing alligator rolls, trying to get away. And it was so bad. If a leaf blew across the street a block away, the dog would use that for an excuse to just start lunging and trying desperately to get away. And he would even redirect with his biting and come back on his handler and bite our hands. He would not respond the way any other dog has ever responded to an electronic collar. And the first time that the owner and I worked him, we went out into the neighborhood just to try to get him calmed down. And it ended up being a 2-hour ordeal. And at the end of 2 hours, a teenager came and joined a group of kids that we had gotten him settled down around. And he lunged so hard that he broke the metal choke collar that he had on. And so we just had to put a leash, rig a leash up, loop it around his neck, and do our best to get him home. After which I got some more equipment. I got an Amish leather leash that's about $50. That is the double leash. You're probably familiar with these, JT, or you may not be, because I'd never had to get one of these before. But I was able to put a pinch collar and a nylon choke so that we could keep him from getting away, from breaking the equipment and getting away. And I told the owner before we started that this was going to take a long time. This was not going to be easy. It was just really severe behavior, and every training method that I tried, the dog would react to. And so after that first session, I noticed the other times that I'd come to their house that the dog was always carrying these cloth, like Olympic rings. It's a toy, but it's got the 3 rings. And he's really cute, but he's obsessed. He will not let go of those. He carries them around. And the owner had mentioned that, yeah, he likes to play tug with those, and he's always trying to get them to play tug. So I came up with the idea that to get an actual linen tug, the same that is used a lot for tug training in Schutzhund protection work. And the second time that I went over there, we went out in the backyard, and sure enough, the dog just absolutely loved to tug. And so for the last couple of months, I've been working the dog just to the point where I'm exhausted every time I work him. Every time he sees a person or a dog or a school bus or a leaf or whatever, and starts to go into that state where he's just starting to get agitated, I present the tug, or I actually agitate him. Not just a simple game of tug, but really jumping around and kind of, slapping him on the side and really getting him excited. And it has worked. It has absolutely worked, to the point where we've been to the dog park, this big dog park that's totally fenced, but it's very busy. And we have been able to, I've been able to get him to start, instead of going into that agitation mode, I've been able to get him to, I see something I'm getting excited about, turn around and let's play tug. And it's working really, really well, because dogs at the dog park are able to come up and actually sniff his butt. And as long as I keep him engaged in the tug, he's fine. He just wants to play tug. So yesterday, the owners came, both of them, And as we were walking out of the dog park, I explained to the people that were coming in that the dog acts aggressive. He's not really aggressive. He won't actually bite, but he'll act like it. And we were able to walk out of the gate with nothing. He walked out. He didn't go after the other dog. He didn't lunge. And it was high fives all around. So now my job is to get both husband and wife to understand how to really engage that dog in the tug before he goes into agitation mode. So this is a long story, but the day before, Julie, the wife, and I were at another location. It's a abandoned sort of golf course. They don't use it for golfing anymore, and a lot of people go there with their dogs. And Julie wasn't quick enough on the draw with the tug, and when somebody came around the corner with their dog, the dog went into that agitation mode, and he did redirect, and he did bite her. So, and so it's a double-edged type of thing. It not only is she not good at being fast enough with with using the tug, but also she is the owner, and he's, I think, more wanting to do that agitation, especially with her. So there might be a little bit of protection in his mind that he needs to do to protect her from the other dog or whatever. But it's noticeable, the difference. I mean, it's night and day when I'm working him. So now my job is really getting the owners up to speed.
Do you notice that she has some fear? Like, does she have a little bit of fear about it?
She's very difficult to read. And I actually said that to her yesterday when we were at the dog park. I said, you're very hard for me to read. You're very stoic. I have trouble seeing through your walls, but I guarantee this dog doesn't. And the dog knows everything about you. And she laughed. She knew exactly what I was talking about. And so there may be some fear. I don't see it. She's a police officer. She's used to being able to get, all kinds of crazy situations under control. She's used to being large and in charge, but the dog is different. And so I've actually seen her go into police mode when we've been out walking around, and I'm like, whoa, she's this little tiny thing, but when she's large and in charge, she's very intimidating. And but with the dog, it's a totally different story.
Yeah, the other thing that would come into play there, and I do have some experience. I had my own. I had a Belgian Malinois that was an apprehension dog, which means I could send him to bite people, and he was also a narcotics detection dog. Handful, but one of the things that I always went down the road of when I was working with in that sector was to really make sure that you have a stable dog. And this dog obviously has some issues with stability. But one thing that I think comes to mind for me right away when I think about that situation is that's the typical thing that will happen is the person who does have that large and in charge. That's what she does for her job. When it comes to her own dog, when it comes to your own dog, when it comes to my own dog, right, my reaction is completely different. I have a dog. My heart dog is a Weimaraner, and I know that I do things that I would tell my clients not to do, and I'm doing it subconsciously. It's conscious because I've worked on it long enough with her, but it's subconscious at the same time. So I would say in this case, you definitely have a case of the subconscious fear that this dog is going to turn on her, and obviously it has to a certain degree. So that fear is real. And then there's going to be the underlying part of the fact that she is large and in charge. She is a police officer. She should be able to, there is a bit of that attitude, like I should be able to handle this. And so I think that honestly, you've got a big job ahead of you because you have to deal with training that emotion, the emotional status of that. And then on top of it, the timing thing is going to be huge. Like she cannot be late on the draw. She cannot.
Right. And so yesterday at the dog park, because she had the dog had redirected on her the day before, and she had some, scabs because he bloodied her a little bit the day before. So I had the husband work him once I turned it over. And even the husband isn't as fast on the draw, but I know that the husband isn't as emotionally involved with this dog as she is. And so it was really important. It could have turned into just a disaster if she got emotional at the dog park. It could have just been, and so that's why I turned to him. And he needed to get some attention because she kind of she kind of would rather be the one working with the dog, and he sometimes feels left out. So it was the perfect scenario. And so, yeah, the one thing I will say though is she's been a gem. She's been really awesome. Like I've told her several times, if every one of my clients worked as hard as you do, my job would be so much easier, because she really has engaged and she really has been doing her homework and she's been trying. So, okay, trying, I hate that word. You either do it or you don't, but she's willing to accept that she needs to do things differently, and she is practicing doing things differently, even though it doesn't come easy to her.
Mm-hmm. So, and when you first explain this, the reaction comes when this dog is on leash, right? It's not there when there's no leash on.
And if you let go of the leash when a dog is running towards him, or the kid just walks into the situation and he's going berserk, if you let go, he runs up and touches the kid with his nose. That's it. And I think that some of the training, quote unquote, that was done with this dog originally, and I'll never be able to prove this, but I'll swear it till the day I die, they were overtraining him on the agitation part to make up for the fact that he doesn't have the aggression that said owner wanted him to do.
Exactly.
So
exactly. And, you know, being in that world, I don't know how much you've worked in that world, but I worked in that world for a while because I had my own dog, and it was really interesting world to work in. Especially I had what, you know, was described as a shit hot dog, and I was a woman handling the dog. And so there was a lot of things that came at me just because of that. And so I actually saw things. The reason I tell you the story, because I think it really does play into this scenario. I saw people come into it, or people that had been in it, and instead of reading that dog and where that dog was, and building what it was they needed the dog to do or wanted the dog to do, and teaching it to do that, and like showing it where it could go with that as a job, they forced it and pushed it. And a lot of times if they push it and they push it in that world, they can push it with some serious negativity, you know, as far as reactionary, like literally hanging the dog up and doing things like that. Then the dog, yeah, he's gonna like think about it in a whole different term than you really wanted him to do. In these people's minds, though, they think that they're going to push that dog into doing it by doing that behavior to them. And it ends up to be exactly what you've got, which is mess with that kind of thing. Right. So I will say, I mean, just when you said, I don't like the word trying, I'm the same way. It's like you either do or you don't. But this woman really has some commitment, it sounds like. And that's the perfect scenario that this dog could have, because otherwise this dog would be in real trouble. And I also hand it to you that you are taking the time to do this, because in my years of doing it, it's hard. It's really hard to put that much into it, because you're taking chances in a lot of areas doing it. And the chance is that there's failure in it. And that's the hard part, I think, about training. Is that can happen. And
in this scenario, okay, number one, I'm losing money on this deal. I certainly didn't discount the training, and the training's not cheap, but I'm losing money because I've put so much time into it. And I actually brought the dog over here over Easter weekend and took him to the dog park on my own, because I didn't want anybody around. I didn't want the owners around the first time and the second time that I did that. And then I took him to the golf course on my own and sat there for 4 hours, having him sit on top of a crate, or in the crate with the door open, while people came by on skateboards with their pit bull pulling them, you know, on a harness and all kinds of stuff. And the dog did great. In fact, of course, you know this, you've you can put the words right in my mouth. The dog did better because it was just him and me, and the owner wasn't there. But it was a great opportunity to, just sort of condition him or decondition him to be so reactive, and basically putting obedience. And I tell people this all the time. You have a problem with your dog, whether it's pooping and peeing all over the house, like was your show the other day, or it could be anything. If you put obedience on the dog and learn how to teach your dog to sit and stay, or stay on top of a dog crate, or stay on top of whatever, little simple things like that, it's kind of global. And once you start doing that and establishing with the dog that you expect certain things and that you won't accept anything else, then a lot of other things clean up. So that was my purpose for being at the golf course on Easter Sunday and having the dog sit on the box. You can lunge and do, pirouettes and do stupid things as long as you stay on the box. And if you fall off the box, which you did fall off a couple times, I'm not gonna feel sorry for you at all. And you're getting right back up on the box, and you're gonna stay there. And I'm gonna be across the street or sitting in an easy chair or something, but you're gonna stay on the box. And so that was really helpful.
So another question I have, when you said you're doing that agitation, if you might, with the tug, is this, and it crosses over with what you just said. I like to build on, especially a dog like this, to actually build on the obedience part of it. And this is a different scenario than a lot of people I don't even use that word with. I use it more I like to think of it more as getting the dog to do things with you, or do things that are fun, or to just follow directions, basically. In this case, you have to start from a different spot, I think, in a bit of a way. The other thing is it is a working dog, so they get that. But my question is, when you're doing the tug and you get the dog, tugged up, I guess you might say, there is that part of the fact that you're still getting this dog agitated. And if that agitation goes away, then what happens? Well, granted, it might not, it's going to be a long time until that agitation goes away, until you get them off of doing that. One of the reasons I got into this business is I had a dog that I'm literally, for years, I had carried a tennis ball with me because if another dog came along, I'd be like, okay, check. And I trained him on that tennis ball. But my question is, are you planning to, because I think it's probably early now to do this, but are you planning to add in calming down in the midst of that tug? So in other words, tug, 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 sit, out, tug, tug, tug. So that there's this, he's got to build that time to actually be calm while all this is going on around him.
I love that question, because I was just getting ready to describe, I teach all my dogs to sit on a little stool. After they get used to sitting on top of a big dog crate, then I have a folding stool in the back of my truck from Walmart. And if you want a really tiny one, they make one half the size that I get at another store. But it's really hard for dogs to figure out at first where their back end is in order to be able to sit on that little tiny stool. And that was the picture that I wanted to put up as of him sitting on the stool, because it's really cute. Yeah. But he, even with a flat collar on, if I try to guide him up onto the stool, he freaks out and he reacts, he pulls away. And it's like somebody ingrained in this dog that anytime somebody's pulling on him, he has to get away. And so I used what I had. I had my linen tug, and every time he would accidentally, his paw would cross the stool and actually just barely touch, I would hold the tug up and let him just put his mouth on it and tell him, good dog, good dog. So my marker word is good dog. And I was doing this in front of the owner. And I said, this is just like if you had a clicker, except we've already got way too much stuff in our hands. We've got all this equipment on the dog, and we're holding the transmitter for the electronic collar, and we've got a pinch collar, and now we've got two leashes, actually three, because the one leash is a double leash. And then we've got the third leash on the flat collar, because, when you try to, teach a dog with a pinch collar or something or a choke collar, you're giving corrections when you should be giving rewards. And so I went and put the flat collar on, but it wasn't working because even the pressure from the flat collar makes him react. So I just started giving the marker word, good dog, good, good. And just giving him the tug for a reward, not a big tug, but just a little tug. And then just that little tiny, 2 seconds, if that, maybe 1 second, maybe a half a second. Good dog, here's the tug, touch it, kiss it. And it took me longer to get him to sit on the stool with his hind end and the whole thing on there than it's ever taken me. But it took about an hour. So the owner had to leave for a few minutes and came back. And when she came back, I had him sitting on the stool. And it was all positive, just using the reward. So, and that's a really difficult thing, but I wanted to distract him from the fact that the other dog, his housemate, was there and his owner. So I wanted to be working on teaching him a new skill while all the chaos the chaos that's in his mind was going on. So kind of distracting him. So yes, we're already starting that, but with this dog, it's a challenge because I've never seen any of this. I've been doing this for 10 years. I've never seen any of it.
Yeah.
And nothing that I normally use is working. And I haven't tried food treats because it's hard for me to believe that this dog would even care about food treats. He might. But that would, again, having a clicker in my hand in addition to everything else, or having treats in my hand, I don't know if I could. I'm just not coordinated enough to do all that. So
no, I totally understand. My only interjection there would be, it's amazing what kind of little kind of turn actually pays somebody off. Like, I'll give you an example in my life that doesn't have anything to do with dogs, but it's an analogy. So, I
hold that for just a second. I asked a question, so I just want to clear that up. Jess is asking when you touch his back and near his tail. No, he does not freak out. I could do anything. I could whack him with a flat hand. That's part of the agitation, and that just gets him excited. That doesn't bother him. What bothers him is having the any type of collar, whether it's a prong or a choke or just a flat collar, him being restrained, because I think that he's been trained, quote unquote, by somebody earlier in his life to do all that agitation to kind of make up for the fact that he's not really an aggressive dog. That's my idea.
Yeah. I agree. Yep. Amateurs, training protection. Sometimes that's the case.
I didn't mean.
There's also the thing that happens with somebody who has done it before, had a protection dog before, and then they get another dog, and that other dog does not react the same, has a different drive, and they try to force it. So that could be the problem too. So back to when we were talking about payoffs and what could actually turn the dog to see something a little bit different. Just a little, analogy of, as a pro triathlete, swimming was an issue for me. And I used to swim 20,000 yards a week. Yeah. So that I could do this thing, so I could get it done. I didn't love swimming. I was a biker and I was a runner, right? Now, I do swim and I actually kind of like it, but I got on a paddle board, which is this long thing that you get on top of and you paddle. And I'm in the ocean and I paddle. And now I do that 3 days a week. I spend 5.5 to 6 hours a week paddling on a board. I'm still in the water. I'm still paddling. And I love it. It just is like, oh, if you told me to get in the water and swim, I'd be like, no, I don't like it. So my analogy there is sometimes there is, and I know this with dogs, sometimes there's the littlest thing that can actually make them want to work in a different way. My own dogs, one of them I can throw a tennis ball all I want for her, and she just looks at it like, yeah, right. I throw a racquetball, she's all over it. Like, just like, crazy. Like, it's that much of a little bit of a difference. So, it's worth trying. Like, when I'm in those situations, I'm going to go down the road of trying, even if I think it's the littlest nuance of switching, but I'll like watch it just to see if that dog reacts in just a little bit of a different way. And if it does, if it's the way that I can pull it out just a little bit more.
So, so what we're talking about is problem solving. And so that's where finding somebody, if you don't spend a lot of time training dogs, finding somebody that doesn't just do things by rote because they learned some things in such a way. And so I always tell people, wherever you are in the country, find somebody who competes in a sport like Schutzhund, like ring sport. If you have that type of dog, you have a German Shepherd, you have a Belgian Malinois, you have a Rottweiler. Myself, I have spent some time, just a little bit, about 9 months, hanging out with a very, very well-known Schutzhund trainer here in the Northwest. And he's just awesome. He's a retired police canine handler. And I was using my little Kelpie when I first got her out of the shelter. And she loved to alert and bite the bad guy. But when it came time, because for those of you who don't know, in Schutzhund competition, if you're even doing a Schutzhund one, there comes a point where the decoy makes an escape. I'm probably saying this wrong, but they have to turn around when the dog's up on the bite sleeve, and they have to hit the dog on the head with a leather baton. And when that happened, Spanky, she just didn't understand why her best buddy in the whole world would hit her on the head with a baton. She just doesn't have the aggression. Whereas what you want in a dog like that is when they get hit on the head by the baton, they say, that really excites me, and I'm just going to bite harder, and, da-da-da. So she wasn't the right dog. So I've had a little bit of experience, thank God, because otherwise I'd be totally lost with this dog. But as a retriever trainer, if you're doing hunt, test, and field trials, you have to train your dogs in specific things, specific tasks, but you have to do it in different locations all the time. There's constantly change, because everywhere you go for a trial or a hunt test, there's going to be different topography, different weather, different scenarios. And your dog has to be so well schooled in all those skills that they can do it with their eyes closed. In order to be able to do that kind of training, especially if you have to do a lot of training by yourself, which you do if you're going to be really competitive, you have to learn how to problem solve. You have to learn. And so, as an example, one thing that retriever trainers will tell you, you can read it in a million books. Don't ever, ever, ever play tug with a retriever, because then they'll want to tug on a bird when you're trying to get them to release. Well, I'm here to tell you that is not necessarily true. And I had this show dog Labrador one time that the owner wanted me to put him through the trained retrieve process, and he just was shutting down. But around the house, I noticed that he loved to play tug. He loved to play tug with the other dogs, and if I picked something up, he would come over and try and tug with it. And you know what? Nothing else was working. What the hell? I started giving him rewards with the tug, and we got through that training so fast. And there was never a problem with him releasing the birds. So you have to be able to think on your feet, and you have to try different things. If one thing isn't working, you got to try something different. So.
Yep, it's so true. And the other thing, I've always said that dog training is an art. There's not one book that's written to tell you how to do it. There's not several books that's written to tell you how to do it. It's really an art. You really have to pay attention to how the dog's reacting, how you're reacting. There's intrinsic things about this dog's personality that are always going to be there. And so you need to build on those, and to build on that it may not be what is tried and true with several other dogs. It could be something entirely different.
Right.
I have to say that I really agree with you, Kate, on this whole idea, whether it's a pet dog or a working dog. There's lots of places out there that tell you, oh, Kate disappeared, so I'll just keep on. She'll come back in, I'm assuming. There's lots of people out there that will tell you that you cannot play tug with a dog, that it's a really bad idea. And a lot of times people are taking away what could be really fun with the dog. First of all, from the dog standpoint and from your standpoint, and from the fact that you can use it as a really great training tool while it's fun. So, you know, there's always the negative media out there. You see some dog who like mauled somebody or did something bad, and they're saying because it's because of the tug. Well, no, the dog was out of control. There was no training that went into it. Let's see. I'm going to put this up here. Steve asked a question. Do you think there is one primary thing to keep in mind when you're trying to train a dog? Steve, that's a great question. One primary thing. What I'm going to say about that is the primary thing is to name and explain. And what I mean by that is you need to name what you want the dog to do when the dog is doing it. And that's actually an explanation for the dog. People get it backwards all the time. It's a natural thing for us as humans to get it completely backwards, in that they will tell the dog, they'll name what the dog is doing and think that the dog is supposed to stop doing it. So in other words, if the dog is barking, blah, 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 and you're going quiet, 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 and the dog's still barking, you've named that action that they're doing quiet. Okay. But they're doing it. So they think that quiet means bark. So when the one primary question that you have, always make sure that you're naming what you want your dog to do in the moment that the dog is doing it. And I think that if you have that thought in your head, you can get a long ways with dogs. And so I hope that answered your question.
Can you see me now?
Yes, I can see you. Okay. You're back.
And the other flip side of the question that you just answered of Steve is a friend of mine, a really great amateur retriever trainer. She always, her phrase is, don't point your finger at it. So if a dog's doing something that you don't want them to do, don't keep focusing on that, because you're just going to keep getting more of the same. So focus on what you do want and name it or mark it like I've been doing with the German Shepherd. Good, good. I don't have room for a clicker, but I can do the same type of clicker training with my voice with a marker word. There's a couple questions before Steve's that we should probably go into. And if for those of you that are new to Blab, if you want to ask a question, it's very helpful to put / and then capital Q. And that way we can drag it over, or at least JT can drag it over and highlight it so that we can get it answered. But there was a question before. I'm going to try to scroll up. So right here, Silent Seizure is asking, what do you think about Pinecones? And I'm going to answer that because I have a very passionate answer about that. And then before that, he says, mine only like the biting part. So it sounds like you've done some sort of protection training with somebody. The guy hit my dog on the head and my dog was, dude, I thought we were buddies, not cool. Okay, so that's what Spanky did. Now, Spanky, my little Australian Kelpie from the shelter, was brought along very carefully, and every step was put in place before this happened. But she just doesn't have the kind of aggression drives that she needs to have for that type of competition. However, you can screw up a dog by trying to go too fast and not putting one foot in front of the other and trying to shortcut things. So dog training is definitely not rocket science. It's definitely not. But the hard part about dog training is slowing everything down and breaking things down into their smallest elements. So training a dog, or training really anything, even a rat, you've got to put it in little tiny steps. So
even a person, sorry.
Yeah, even a person. So Ed Frawley from Learburg, I heard an analogy years ago about how his brother trained rats to play basketball. And so again, you have to break everything into their tiny pieces. And what people do is they try to shortcut things. And so if you're doing a trained retrieve, this is my area of expertise because I train gun dogs. But if you're doing a trained retrieve, you start with hold, hold, and then you go from that to fetch from right here, and then fetch up here, fetch down here, fetch off the ground, walking fetch, fetch from a pile. And then you start adding in your stop on a whistle and your casting. And at the same time, you're over in the yard. We call it yard work because it's so much fun doing the little things that we're teaching the dog to stop on a whistle on a leash, to take a cast on a 6-foot leash, throw something over there. And if you do 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day of that, then when you get to where you're wanting to stop your dog on a whistle coming back from the pile and then going out to the pile, you've already laid your groundwork. So going back to what happened with your dog, maybe your dog didn't have the right temperament, or maybe some steps were skipped. Somebody got in a hurry, or somebody just didn't know what the steps were in between when they didn't know the transitions. So your other question, I love this question. What do you think about using pine cones to teach a soft mouth on a bird dog? I know several hunters that use this method. That I've never heard the pine cone, but what I have heard is wrapping a bird in barbed wire or something like that. If you're having to resort to that, I'm here to tell you that you're skipping a bunch of steps, and you really aren't doing it right. Okay, if your soft mouth bird dog, your soft mouth hunting dog, ends up with a hard mouth, then you haven't done the steps correctly. I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of dogs, and I've never had one turn out to have a hard mouth that I've worked with. So, and the same with gun shy, okay? You can take a dog that's been all the way through the trained retrieve, been introduced to guns since they were a little tiny puppy, and the way I start with a gun dog, a puppy, is we're getting them first excited about retrieving. Excitement, excitement, excitement. Just like that German Shepherd that I'm working with. Somebody got him excited about the agitation part of things. We want to create a maniac about retrieving, a maniac about birds, a maniac about all that stuff. And then we take a starter pistol way across the field with the lowest pop. So I use crimps in my starter pistol, and I use the brown ones. So they're really soft. So they hear this little tiny pop across the field, and then we shorten it up. And then before we ever bring a shotgun out, we shoot over the dog with our starter pistol so that they're hearing that soft pop, only it's loud now, but it's not as loud as a shotgun. Then we move into target loads. So we're using really, like the same loads, like, I don't know, 8s or even lighter loads. So that when we're introducing the dog, it's not this big kaboom. So you take that dog, the dog's excited about retrieving, you can shoot over the dog with target loads, and then you start taking the dog hunting, and by now they're so excited they're not going to be bothered if you're using, let's say, a 3 or a 4. But if you take that same dog that we've painstakingly taken all the steps to do, and you go out on your covered porch in the evening and you start doing target practice with your rifle and you're shooting at beer cans, you can instantly turn that dog who loved and thrilled to the sound of gunfire into a gun-shy dog, because now you've taken what matters out. There's no retrieving, there's no setup, just without warning, you're there firing this really big gun, and it's reverberating against, the covered porch. and there's no reason. It's just like, surprise, you know, like my grandpa used to throw firecrackers around at Thanksgiving dinner just because he thought it was funny to hear everybody scream. So again, the firecrackers happened out of nowhere. It was out of context. So you always want to make sure, if you're training a gun dog and you don't want your dog to be gun shy, make sure that you train in context. The gunfire is always associated with the really fun stuff. Likewise, if you're going and you're hunting and you get invited to somebody's private duck club, and you go on the boat through all the sloughs, and you get there and they've got this really awesome covered duck blind, and the dog is inside the duck blind, and you've got 5 guys in there, and everybody's going to shoot when the ducks or the geese are coming in, and the dog has never been exposed to that. Don't do that. Take the dog to the blind the day before, or if you're in the situation where you're going to have 5 guys there, shoot off the gun and throw a bumper or something before you go in the duck blind, and then, you know, shoot the gun in the duck blind with just 1 person in there. Don't start off, oh, surprise, you've never experienced this before, and now we're going to have 5 guns going off inside the covered duck blind. Does that make sense? Sorry.
Yeah, he says yes. Yes, it does make sense. So along those lines, this question kind of plays into that, is, can you reverse a fearful reaction to a gunshot?
Maybe. It depends on the temperament of the dog, and it comes down to, is it worth it? So if the dog had been brought along carefully, and then this one unfortunate thing happened where your drunk uncle came and shot the rifle at beer cans when you weren't home, and then now the dog's back out hunting with you, it's probably going to be okay. But if the dog wasn't brought along and this just was really, really traumatic, I read things that just aren't worth it to me, like not feeding the dog, and you have to take the dog to some guy that's going to like not feed the dog for a week and be shooting the gun when they finally get fed, and it's like sensory deprivation. And I'm just going to say, you know what? It's not worth it. I wouldn't do that to a dog. It's not worth it. You screwed up. So another thing about gun shyness that I hear all the time. Oh, I don't know what happened. I took my dog to the firing range to get him used to guns. Again, you're out of context. And if you go to the muzzle loading part of the gun range and your dog's sitting in there, sitting in the back of your truck, and there's no retrieving, and that hurts. If you don't have ear protection, you can be like, I don't know, 50 yards away, and it hurts your ears, your teeth rattle. That sucks. Don't do that to your dog. And I hear that all the time. I don't know what happened. I took my dog to the gun range to get him used to guns, and now he's gun shy. So don't do that.
Yeah. So Jess also says he fosters for rescue, and they get a lot of gun shy GSPs, and he lives in an area where guns are being fired all day, every day.
Okay, so if you're fostering, that means they're kind of a rescue and you don't know what their background is, and it really doesn't matter. So you can go back, you can backpedal, and you can start out getting them excited about retrieving or tug and start associating that far off pop with the starter pistol. You can try doing that. You can try desensitization, say that 3 times fast. Steve Snell over at Gun Dog Supply out of Missouri has some tapes that you can buy. So fireworks, for instance. I actually had a dog that had been introduced to guns and loved guns, loved the sound of gunfire, but she was terrified of fireworks, and she knew the difference. And I mean, she would just sit in her crate and shake. And I took her for a walk and told her what a good dog she was. And I was just like, what is this? I'd never seen that before. And she was a young dog. She'd been with me since she was 8 weeks old. Everything had been done right. And she wasn't afraid of guns, but she was afraid of fireworks. So that happened. It was out of context. There were all kinds of bright lights. And it just freaked her out. So, you know, so with your dogs that are gun shy, if they're shaking in their crates or they're shaking in the house because they hear far off gunfire, I would try changing it up and making some fun things happen, and make sure that when a gun goes off, it's like that starter pistol clear across the field. And if that doesn't work, then, you know, just try the desensitization that you can get from Gun Dog Supply. And if that doesn't work, then you just have to do the best you can.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's really redirection. I mean, it comes down to redirection and getting them redirected enough that they can start forgetting about the fact that the gunfire is going off. So I say big noise and speed feed treats and have a party. Yep, exactly. Sometimes it works and others need a quiet place to live forever. Yeah, you know, the truth of the matter is that's what we were talking about earlier. You know, you have to, there's not a tried and true way for each and every dog. You really have to watch the dog, where their intrinsic makeup comes from, and then what their living environment is going to be as well, and how that person's going to handle them. So fostering, yeah, it's interesting because you have them in that spot and then they're going to go to another spot eventually. So you're going to try to get them as stable as you can. So I would look for the things that really, really turn them on and do more of that with them.
And then finding the right owner, because I have a German Shepherd here now that he's not quite a year old, and he has a submissive pee issue. And I told the owners, that's not something that we can train for. It's kind of an instinct that the dog carries over from puppyhood. It's a survival thing. It's a communication with other dogs and people in the pack, including humans. I'm submissive, and they don't even know that they're doing it, and they should grow out of it. But the owners just couldn't handle it because their house was perfect and clean. And the idea of having a dribble on the carpet was they just couldn't handle it. And so I have the dog here, and he's getting better. And I think that by the time he's a year old, or maybe a little bit older than that, he's going to be fine. But I am not going to place that dog with a type A personality whose house has to be super, super clean, and they're going to freak out over if the dog has a dribble, because that's not a good match. So it's really important to find find the temperament of the person to match the temperament of the dog. So
yeah, super important. So definitely.
So the title of our blab is Faye in training dogs. And so I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. So this whole thing with the description of the German Shepherd that I've been working with, that has been super, super challenging. It's really a matter of faith, going out and just knowing that training over here for this translates into a lot of good all around. And if you will go out and do the work, even if it's only 5 minutes or 10 minutes a day, or even every other day, we are going to put one foot in front of the other, and we're going to get down the road towards our goal. And I guess that's kind of the way it is in life with us and our businesses and everything else. Just show up. Woody Allen said 80% of success is just showing up. And if you will just show up and do what you either believe will help, or somebody that you are paying for advice is telling you will help, if you'll just have the faith and suspend your disbelief, then you are going to end up with a dog that is changed, and you're going to have such a deeper bond with that dog, and things are going to be so much better. So,
yeah, I agree. I mean, one of the things that early on in my years of training, I did not believe this. I am a huge believer in it now, but you really working, I with myself, but also with owners and things like that, I really go down the road of visualization and telling people that I want you to visualize this dog and you living the life that you wanted to live with this dog. Now, there's a line there. I don't want people to start thinking, like, let's say they have a dog reactive dog. They want to take their dog to the dog park and let them loose. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying visualize having a peaceful life with this dog and being able to come to a place where you both can function and be peaceful within. And if you start visualizing that, it can happen. So in other words, when you're doing these things, when you show up for the 5 minutes and the 10 minutes and, you know, every day or every other day, or however many times that you can, if you have the visualization in your mind as to how you want the outcome to be, and that it's possible that this is, in fact, not even that it's possible, that it's going to be that way, you go into it with a different way and you can get a better reaction. So in other words, if you go into it thinking, oh, I'm pretty sure that this dog's going to turn and come up the leash at me, they're probably going to turn and come up the leash at you.
Yeah.
So you have to start really put yourself in that visualization and have faith. Like you said, the title, have faith that you are putting the energy in to have the situation get better for everybody involved.
And the other thing is, you know, Kimberly Artley, who wrote the book My Dog, My Buddha, that I interviewed a couple weeks ago. And I'm just going to paraphrase because I don't have the quote in front of me. But basically, if you want to know what kind of energy you're putting out to the world and you're having trouble finding that out, you don't need to look any further than your dog. So a lot of times, I think usually the second or third session, I will teach people's dogs to sit on a dog crate, to jump up and sit on a dog crate. And I'll do it a couple times. I'll move away. I'll walk around. Their dog's sitting there just nice and pretty. And then I'll hand the leash to them and say, okay, it's your turn. And a lot of times it totally goes into just chaos. They're circling around and around, and the dog's fighting them, and they're doing this seesaw thing back and forth, and the dog won't get on the crate, and they're getting frustrated, and they're starting to sweat. And the difference is that I have absolutely no doubt that the dog's going to get up on the crate, and they are totally filled with doubt. That's the only difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's a huge difference, actually. So, yeah.
And so there's a big push right now. Nobody wants to spend money on dog training. And nobody wants to spend the time on dog training. Everybody wants some magic pixie dust to sprinkle on their dogs and have the dog be fixed. And so there's a big push right now for online dog training. And I'm going to get into it. I'm going to get into it because I have to. But my fear is, what about all those things about, okay, now it's your turn to put your dog on top of the dog crate. Because if I'm online, I'm telling you what to do. It's like I'm giving you a recipe. I'm even showing you, but I'm not there to say this to you. Look, here's what it looks like when I do it, and here's what it looks like when you do it. And I'm not going to be there to talk people through the problems that they're having, which most of the problems that we have with our dogs are here and here. And so for people that want to do internet training, any training that you do, I don't care, any training that you do is good training. It's good, especially if you can take the good and leave the bad. And that's what I tell people about, like, retriever and gun dog training. If people want to go out and get into an amateur training group, that's great. In fact, some of the amateurs are really accomplished trainers. But when you enter into a situation like that, you know you're going to have to trade off with those other people. They'll throw stuff for your dog and shoot and throw for your dog, and then you're going to go out in the field and shoot and throw for theirs. If you're training with a big enough group, you're going to see some stuff that's really icky. And so what you want to do is you want to be able to pull the good and take that in and then leave the bad and just leave it alone. And you can tell what's good by the way the dog acts, and is the dog happy? And is the dog's tail up and wagging, and is the dog excited about the work he's doing, or is he all depressed and crunched down? So there's nothing wrong with going online and learning everything you can. But if your dog is not responding and things are getting worse, then you really need to call somebody that's a problem solver.
See, I think, and I'm going to be the advocate here. I understand exactly what you're saying about the online training. I do a lot of training online with people now. And one of the reasons why it's okay for me to go down that line is because I get to touch some people who would have not gone to training at all. Mm-hmm. And so their dog would have been suffering even more, to the point that they may have like surrendered them to, a rescue or to, the shelter or whatever it is, because they really had no starting point. So my hope is through the information that I get out through online, and then the people who do work with me online, I'm able to get them through some psychological things, mm-hmm. get them some basic things to do. And then, through their questions, if they really, that's where the commitment starts. When they start realizing, well, I could be committed to this. There is some hope. Oh, I wasn't thinking about it in this way. That's my moment that I get my network of people who, wherever they are, and say, hey, here's a hands-on person. Take this another step, because you're on a roll here. You're way further than when you started, and now you have some understanding. And I think sometimes that's going to make it turn for people too, because one of the reasons they won't go to get hands-on training for somebody is they don't want to look like an idiot. They don't want to look stupid. They don't want to be embarrassed because of their dog's behavior, because they think it's a reflection upon them. Mm-hmm. All of these psychological things happen before they ever get the dog to training. And the sad thing to me is that the dog loses. If they never do it, if they never show up, if they never get any help at all, the dog loses. They lose too in so many ways. They lose too because their life is, they've got just another agitation in their life that isn't working for them. And so that's another thing they put in their hat of like, well, I tried that and that didn't work. So, and that's, as we age, we lose our playfulness. We lose our willingness to try something brand new. We lose our energetic enthusiasm about, well, yeah, let's try that, because of all of those reasons. And I think by getting people to put their toe in and bring their dog paw along with them and start introducing them to some ideas, and then get them into like, oh, well, maybe I'm going to listen to her again. I have a lot of people that pay me for online.
And with things
because
like, I was just going to say, with things like this platform and others, even Google Hangouts and Skype, if you can consult and talk sometimes when you get into trouble, that's really awesome. And my hope is that we'll be able to, really show and demonstrate like different things. Silent Seizure, I should know your name. I think I looked you up, but anyway.
I think it was Jess. I think it's Jess. I'm not sure. Yeah, Jess. Okay. Hey, yes. Yeah. Anyway, so I have the same thing, Kate. When I first started doing it, it was like, I don't want to lead people down the wrong road because they need hands-on. But I really think that there's a great stepping stone to give education and then get them into the next step, because then they have a little more confidence that they know the language and they know what they should be doing.
Well, and then also the more experience that we have, the more we can pick up from online training. Because if we already have that basic education, then we're going to be able to pull so much more in from that higher level of training. So somebody like Jess has had a lot of experience with dogs, doing rescue, doing different types of training. And for somebody like that, things are just going to click, especially when you can show the training with a live dog and everything on there. I'm worried the same way Larry Crone, who's a trainer in Nashville, Tennessee, Pack Masters, does a lot of videos. And he gets calls from people that have taken online how to use like an electronic collar. And now things are going south with the dog. And I know that those types of trainings are really helpful for a lot of people, but if things, I'm just saying that if things are going south with your dog, you need to stop and either start all over and go back to the beginning and make sure you didn't miss any steps, or consult with somebody.
That's cool. So speaking of having to train some dogs, I got to get some dogs out.
Okay. Yeah, me too. And we've gone over because I think we started about 5:15. So 4:15. So I think we're about 5 minutes over, but this was great. Thank you so much for being my guest. And
you're very welcome.
Hopefully next week, I've got my fingers crossed that we can get Bill on and talk about holistic healing for dogs. And that can sort of flow over, if people want to, into investigating into holistic things for people.
Exactly. I'm glad you were able to help, Jess, and thank you for your questions and your input here. It was really awesome.
Yes, thank you. It's awesome to have somebody in the chat role who's engaged, and that helps bring up the energy. So thank you very much, Jess. I hope you'll come back and do this again, and maybe we can have you as a guest another time. Thank you so much.
Cool. All right. Have a great Friday night and go have some fun with your dogs.
All right, everybody. Happy training. Enjoy the weather, whatever your weather is. Enjoy that weather with your dogs. Bye now.
Great. Bye for now.